So today we're going to talk about what are widgets and why we want to use them in the context of progressive decoupling. We're going to check on why we still need CMSs and why we want to integrate this ecosystem with those. And also we'll touch, and this is not probably going to be in order, but mentioned all the time, the widget registry, the concept of widget registry and what that is and how is that useful. So to dive right in, what are widgets? So when I'm talking about widgets, I'm thinking about my first time when I worked with this concept, which was in 2014. We were working on a big news platform, a Lullabot, and we had these nuggets of interactivity. And this news site wanted to have users coming in, commenting and interacting in meaningful ways with the content. So they had the idea, or we had the idea, to, alongside the Drupal generated content, the server side generated HTML, we would inject some JavaScript applications. So when I talk about widgets, I think about JavaScript applications that are embedded alongside server-side generated HTML. And yeah, for that concept in 2014, we were just hard-coding them in the templates in the places that we thought it was useful. But today I'm gonna make a case for having the JavaScript applications be configured and embedded by CMS editors and site builders. So back then, 2014, we're talking about when AngularJS was cool, Angular 1. And today we have a whole different set of tooling, and JavaScript has exploded since then. But we are still doing the same cool ideas. So why JavaScript, right? Why has it exploded, and why do we want JavaScript and not to do everything with server-side generated HTML that maybe by PHP, Drupal, Sitecore, AM, whatever the CMS that you do. So there are many reasons for that. The one that we used in 2014 in that project was for a better reactivity and interactivity. So the idea was that if we had a very static HTML generated by Drupal, it would be highly cacheable. It would get into the CDN or even in the browser cache, right? And then we could sprinkle on top a little bit of JavaScript. And with that idea, we could just have very fast served pages and then have the reactive and interactive part added by JavaScript. So that's one of the things that we like about JavaScript. Also, another thing that we today find useful in one of my projects is that we can have different teams working on different parts of the site, or even in different parts of the same page, right? And they don't have to be coordinating complex deployments, which is what happens typically with different teams converging together on the same publishing platform. And that is because each team writes their JavaScript application in isolation, and then the browser executes the JavaScript, and we can have different deployment pipelines and even different servers serving the JavaScript that the browser is going to be serving. So in this example, the team number one, they are working on the navigation, while team number two, they're working on the feature set for this page. Let's say that this page is a major cloud computing site that offers different services and you're looking at buying the virtual servers, right? And then there could be a team number three, who's working on the price calculator. And alongside that, we are serving some server-side generated HTML. Maybe that's the body field that the editor filled out, or maybe a collection of fields, whatever the CMS thinks it's useful. So this could be a scenario where three teams are serving in different servers their JavaScript, and they have their own deployment pipelines and converging together on the page. Another big reason for JavaScript is that JavaScript has the biggest talent pool, and we all know about Stack Overflow, and they have a yearly survey for different topics around programming, and one of it is what is the most popular language, and JavaScript is consistently the first one always. And not only that, but you can see there that TypeScript is also very popular, which if you don't know, TypeScript is just a superset of JavaScript with strong typing. So you can see here that by building your pages or experiences in JavaScript, you can have talent from a bigger pool, and you can hire those resources. All right, I love this one because this appeals more for the dev and not for the human research persona, and I am a developer. JavaScript has a better developer experience, and that is because since it's so popular, many tools help improve the quality of the project. I'm thinking about Jest, Storybook, Gulp, Husky, you name it. Like, there are so many that will help you, from unit testing to component management to Git hooks, setting your Git hooks, etc. And that will improve the quality of the project, alongside with many frameworks that take care of the rough edges, like web components or Nuxt.js. Maybe Nuxt is not very relevant in the context of widgets, but it is in the context of JavaScript, developing in JavaScript. But it goes beyond that, because there are many platforms that will give you better support, which leads to improved workflows, which leads to better quality in your software. I'm thinking about visual div platforms, or platforms that analyze your code quality, or platforms that let you deploy with ease, like Netlify. And there are many of those, and JavaScript, being so popular, has permitted this ecosystem to flourish, and for us to take advantage of it. So some of you may be asking, well, should we just building JavaScript applications then? The answer is yes and no, because we still care about the content, right? The content is the heart of the web, right? If you had great user experiences but mediocre content, your project would probably be doomed to fail. And to manage content, you need a content management system, and it still gives you a lot of features, like especially if content is your product and is central to your business, then you will need a CMS, because the CMS will provide you with many features that are very difficult to build from scratch. I'm thinking about managing pages, setting up URLs, the SEO rules and the restrictions, who can see what. Maybe you want to have some authenticated traffic, and how you do that with the CMS is probably easier than if you have to build it yourself, right? or if you want to leverage existing solutions for media libraries, and also editorially control layouts. And not only that, but it's easier, for instance, in Drupal, to know which security patches you need to apply. There is a centralized process, which centralized in this context, in security, is a good idea. So the CMS still provides a lot of value. All right, follow-up question. We need a CMS. We want JavaScript. What if we just put some JavaScript in our CMS templates, right? That's a good idea. And yes, you can go that route, but we'll see that the widgets have some advantages over JavaScript in the CMS templates, in the sense that we wanted editors to be able to embed them and to have better workflow in putting the code that you wrote in JavaScript into production. So one of the benefits is that you skip CMS deployments, right? So the idea is that a developer creates a new widget, which is a JavaScript application. They create a new JavaScript application. They push it to the registry, which is nothing more than a JSON feed that lives in a place that is accessible by the internet. And then, without any effort, without doing anything else, editors in production and in all of the lower environments, of course, can access that application, and then they can embed it in the page wherever they want. And beyond that, the bugs and new features that you add to existing widgets that are already embedded, they are immediately applied. So that for me is a big deal, because traditionally you would have something like this. If you were having JavaScript in the templates, you would have a development phase where you develop your JavaScript app, and then you integrate it with a CMS template, and maybe with a content model if you want that application to receive editorial input, like for instance setting the background of the JavaScript application, for instance, or maybe setting the button name for the CTA on the JavaScript application. And so you have all that development side for JavaScript and for the CMS. Once everything is deployed in conjunction, because those are coupled together, you can have the editorial phase, which will go ultimately to the end user. By using widgets in the way that I'm going to be describing them, you just skip step, because you combine the first two. You do only the development in JavaScript, and then that's it. You use the existing CMS integrations, because you'll build JavaScript, but with a set of conventions that will be leveraged by the CMS integrations to be able to put them seamlessly inside of the CMS. So that's kind of a big deal, because it kind of sidesteps several stages of the process in between when you start developing and when the end user receives the editorial experience, and that is improved time to market. So to reiterate, in here, I am the CMS developer, and I get to enjoy coffee and read the paper, while a JavaScript developer creates the app, and with no effort whatsoever by me, the editor and site builder is able to put that calculator that the JS developer just made, using layout builder in Drupal or the other whatever tools that you would use in other CMSs that are integrated with these conventions. And it can be the calculator, but later be an emoji selector. I am still reading the paper and drinking coffee. All right, another big deal for me is that widgets are embedded by editors and or site builders. The JavaScript developer can develop the application in a way that is flexible, and it allows for tweaked experiences depending on some configuration or editorial input. So when building the applications, they will allow for some input to be received into the application. Then when they are writing the metadata for the application, don't worry, we'll get to that in a sec, then they will describe the input that the application accepts, right? That could be, for instance, the theme. If you want to have a light and dark version because you're embedding an application inside of an existing page, and you don't know if the page will be light or dark, and you want to have that flexibility on the widget, on the application, to work with light and dark backgrounds. But the editor is embedding that in the page. The editor knows if it should be dark or light. So it's them who need to select dark or light, right? And by describing the data that the JavaScript application accepts as an input, that can be done and integrated inside of the CMS without any effort. So in here we have display options, button text, and it just shows you a text field while you're embedding this widget of type example widget, right? So it has button text as a label, and then a text field, and then some description saying some random string. If you pay attention to this, you'll see that inside of the properties there is a button text of type string. The title is button text, the description is some random string, and it even gives you some different examples to use. So the CMS will ingest this metadata and will interpret it so they can generate this form automatically that editors will be able to configure. So that's how we get around the no necessary integration in the CMS, because we are not having to write form API for encoding, oh, I know that this widget needs this option, so I'm gonna write for this a ready button, for this I'm gonna write a select box, and for this I'm gonna write a text field or a text area, right? We just have the JavaScript developer define the input data as a JSON schema, and then the CMS will automatically create the form for that. All right, another big plus is that widgets can be embedded anywhere, right? How do you embed a JavaScript application that is added by a JavaScript developer putting their code inside of the CMS templates? How can you put that in between two paragraphs of the body field, right? You can't. You just can't go into the body field and type import whatever widget.js and then call a function in it. That doesn't work like that. It's you can't have developers to embed their applications manually inside of certain areas of the site. You could do it, let's say, remember that example where the navigation was developed by Team 1, you could have that, right? But not inside of the WYSIWYG. So by using widgets, you can have the navigation be a widget. but you can also have them in the layout building tool, using the layout building tools, the WYSIWYG integrations, also your content modeling tools. You could have your article have an entity reference to a widget instance, right? Because widget instances are entities in Drupal, are modeled as entities in Drupal. So if you render a widget instance, you're rendering a JavaScript applications with certain configuration. And the certain configuration added by the editor. So in the end, you will have all of the tooling that Drupal allows you by using entities, but you're rendering JavaScript applications. And also, of course, you can embed widgets using JavaScript third-party tools, because this concept of widgets not only works in a single CMS, it works everywhere. If you have 3 different CMSs, you can have all of these CMSs subscribe to that feed that I mentioned before, that JSON object accessible via the internet, called the registry. You can have that same registry in different CMSs, and it works in all of them. And if you fix something in one particular application, it's distributed to all of the CMSs. If that is something that is going on in your organization. It also works in static HTML. You can embed a JavaScript application there. And it also works in Optimizely pages or Adobe Target pages, or you name it. It works anywhere. You can embed widgets anywhere. So to reiterate here on the left, I am just adding here in the line rectangle, I'm adding a JavaScript application. It's a very basic one inside of an article. And this may not seem like a good experience, but instead of being an umami integration or a recipe site that has a very basic example widget, it could be that a virtual server calculator that allows users to select different paths in a JavaScript app, saying, all right, what is your usage, your CPU usage in your existing infrastructure? And what is the RAM that you need? What is the utilization? So you can have a JavaScript application to provide that user interaction. That's very good. And it could be inside, embedded alongside of an article that shows you how to configure your price estimation. And on the right, you can see how we're using Drupal's layout builder to put calculator to, I know, maybe, or that could be a calculator or a shopping list, right? It could be a shopping list for that recipe that you're seeing, or here the calculator could be relevant because you need to add up what the shopping list would cost you. I don't know. So, when are widgets a good fit, right? Is this an inherently good paradigm? Well, I don't think that it's paradigm that you need to do to apply everywhere. Like, there is still room for that part that we are calling the server generated HTML, and I think that widgets are good if you have one of these 4 categories. Like, if you're interacting with a third-party API, like a review site, maybe you're familiar with G2 Crowd, or maybe that's more like pulling on reviews from Yelp, or maybe that's more commenting, a commenting platform. That's something that is interacting with a third-party API, either for pulling data or for inputting data around the page that the widget is embedded into. Another one can be interactive tools like the pricing calculator that we just talked about, or the checklist of the things that you need to do when following along with that tutorial? Did you increase the size of the log bin, and did you also execute that command to restart the daemon or whatever? So that could be just a checklist that saves it into the local storage. It doesn't make sense to spin up a database to save that, because you will likely go through it, like maybe pull up that tutorial 3 times, and you will appreciate that you have your progress saved there, right? And maybe just local storage is good for that. So that's an interactive tool. And also for data visualization, like I know the evolution of COVID data based on the JSON feed that the government offers, right? So you would just point the JSON object, and maybe that could be a configuration option that the editor puts in, right? This is the URL of the JSON object, and go print I don't know, the graph, or maybe a map of the CDN availability for your cloud platform that you are selling on. And another category, and I'm kind of more hesitant about this one, but it's to add some more pop to the page, right? You can do some things with JavaScript that may be difficult to achieve with traditional HTML only and CSS tools, but I don't know much about that because I'm more of a backend and JavaScript developer. Hopefully I have sold you into this idea and you want to start embedding widget now. And you may be wondering, well, I get the concept, I dig it, I want to try it. So how does that happen? What does that look like? So first you need to take your component, take your application, and you need to write a widget, an application which is basically exposing a render function, a function that takes an HTML ID, and in there it renders a JavaScript application. So for instance, in this one, you can see that it's very simple. I had a component, right? I write in React, and in React I rewrite components, and I just take the component and I render it on the HTML element. And it even takes props. See the title, and that title is the input data that the editor will fill in eventually. So in here you have all of it in a nutshell, and you can see that it's very easy to port your existing components to make them widgets. Like it's a couple lines of code. So you take any component, you render the component, and that's it. So once you have that, very easy, you need to upload the application code to somewhere accessible by the internet. And that is because we are gonna have the CMS download the JavaScript and execute it in the page. Because if you are putting that code inside of your CMS, then you're coupling again the CMS deployment into deploying your application. And as we said, there are many platforms and frameworks that will allow you to make this uploading very, very easily. So this could be maybe just publish to GitHub pages, or maybe just upload to your S3 bucket, or to your cloud object, to your IBM's cloud object storage, or wherever you feel this is relevant. Netlify, maybe FTP to your server. Somewhere you need to upload the code, right? That's easy as well. Then we get to the more tricky part, and this seems convoluted, but there are tools that will make this super easy. But for now, let's forget that those tools exist. You need to publish the metadata, because right now there is no connection between that JavaScript application in a random server, in a random S3 bucket, and your CMS, right? You need to tie that together. So for that, we create a JSON document, which is an array of objects. Each object in that array represents a widget. And in there, we have some basic information like the machine name, the title, the stability or the status of it, some description, and more importantly, we have the directory URL, which is where in the server that you uploaded it, this widget lives, right? Where are the files for the CSS, the JavaScript, the images, etc. And then you have a files key, which is an array of the different files that you will have in there. So once you have written this, and you see here that the settings schema property, this is where you, as a JavaScript developer, define what is the shape of the input data that this widget will accept. And we'll talk about the external peer dependencies at the end. So once you have written this, you need to upload this JSON object, this JSON feed, somewhere as well. It could be, again, GitHub pages, S3, IBM's Cloud Object Storage, your FTP server, whatever, and have that available through HTTP, right? Can be the same server, could be different than the one that you uploaded. Finally, the CMS pulls that JSON object, knows about each one of the widgets, knows how to reach out for the JavaScript, CSS, and assets that it needs to embed every time that it renders them, and that's it, right? You get that nice UI in your editorial site, and you get to start seeing widgets appear into your editorial tools, and you can embed them and configure them, right? So in summary, we did 3 steps, very easy. We created the widget, we upload the widget. That's barely a step. And then you publish the metadata. So you write some information about it and you say, these are the files that this widget is comprised of. All right, you may be wondering, yeah, but still don't know where to start, right? And that's fair, And I skipped all this because there are lots of tools. Like if you head to github.com/js-widgets, you'll see that in that GitHub organization, there are several example repos for writing your widgets, and they come with CI integrations and with tooling to like bundle the application together, so it's easier for the browser to render them. But it also comes with a widget registry boilerplate, which is very interesting because it allows you to generate that metadata very easily. Just go there, fork it, and you'll get many niceties out of the box. Like for instance, the widget catalog. So just like having the metadata about the widgets allows you to render them in the CMS, we can take that same metadata and alongside with building the JSON object for Drupal or any other CMS to consume, we could build a single page application that shows you all of the different widgets. And that is what we call the widget catalog. So this is something that comes out of the box by forking that widget registry boilerplate and making it your own. And remember that these are your widgets, right? This is yours. You start from scratch and these are your applications and you are the commander of those. So basically what the widget catalog is just a list of the available widgets in that registry, and it shows you the metadata that you just wrote. But not only that, but it has the list, but it also renders like the files that you can, the files that the widget defines, the translations, the description, and just like we said that we can embed widgets everywhere, there is a live preview tab that is just the widget embedded there. So you can have stakeholders check on the progress of the JavaScript application and even play with the latest state of the JavaScript application in that live preview. And even when the application requires editorial input to function, the catalog will work. Remember that we saw how the JavaScript developer, when they define the editorial input that they can apply to widgets, they can provide examples. This catalog will leverage those examples. We'll just pick one of the examples for each one of the properties that are configurable. So Stakeholder is happy, and also happy because this paradigm lets you define the governance of the code like you need it, right? Some of you may have cringed at the idea that, oh, a change happened in a JavaScript repo and it's automatically displayed in my production side. No, I don't want that. But remember that it is you as a CMS admin who decides which registries you're putting in there. It's not like that everyone in the world is contributing to the same registry. No, you will have your own registry for your organization, and you will fork, probably you will fork that boilerplate and start from scratch and start adding widgets to there. So it is you who decide which widgets go in there, and hopefully you will only allow applications that you trust. So that's one key point you will only add the registries that you trust into your CMS. And then another point of governance is that since you also own the registry, not only the CMS, since you own the registry, you are who decides which applications go into the registry, but also which updates for each application go into a registry. So you have full control all of the time. And just like sometimes you just do npm install the name of a package and you trust that that package doesn't do anything malicious, in here you have even more tighter control because you are working internally with your teams. Or not. There is flexibility in that. As long as you understand that you can work on different paradigms. All right. Another good tool and another good idea for using these widgets paradigm is that these are production ready. We have been using this in production in sites that get a lot of traffic for a long time. And one of the optimizations that people ask first comes out of the box. And that is that, imagine that you have 3 widgets in a page, and since you work with React, you're likely to have all your widgets be React, right? And for us, we are always using React DOM, React International, and React, right? What if there was a way to not have to bundle these big dependencies every time in each widget? So instead of putting those dependencies n times, you put them once and they all share the same dependency. So you end up with lighter widgets that pull the dependency from the page, from the parent container, right? And that comes, as I said, out of the box. It is in the documentation how to do that. I don't want to get into many details, but you basically tell in one side your application, you tell it don't add React. I know the Webpack. I know that I am importing React, React DOM, and React International at some point, but ignore them. Don't put them in the bundle. Make smaller bundles. So that's the part of making the widgets lighter. And then you have some property in the that you put in the widget registry. Remember that I said towards the end we'll talk about external peer dependencies. This is where you say, Drupal, this widget needs to have available in the page React and download it or inject React from this URL, right? And then you put the CDN URL for React. And finally, I want to say that if you are interested in giving this a try, there are step-by-step tutorials on how to do this. I made a video series, and I post them in video.matewegilo.com, and look for those. There is one video for creating a widget, then another video for forking the catalog and getting your own catalog going and how you operate with that, and everything is leveraging common tools and CI out of the box. And finally, having that and explaining how that works with Drupal and what are the techniques that you can use to have that WYSIWYG integration or that layer builder integration, or putting them inside of the content model. So hopefully you liked this, because that's all I've got. Thank you.